Hello, this is Hannah. Let's go. Biblical Missionaries, Lesson 8. Lesson 8. Cross-cultural missions. Read for this week's study. John 4, chapter 4, verse 4 to 30. Matthew chapter 8, verse 5 through 13. Mark chapter 5, 1 through 20. Matthew chapter 15, 21 through 28. Luke chapter 17, 11 through 19. John chapter 12, verse 20 through 32. Memory text. Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved, in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will declare justice to the Gentiles. Matthew chapter 12, verse 18. How interesting that Jesus spent so much of his earlier years in Galilee, known as Galilee of the Gentiles, Matthew chapter 4, 15. No doubt named because of the non-Jewish influence in the province. In this region, in Nazareth, Jesus spent the majority of his years before starting his public ministry. Thanks to its position, Nazareth was near major routes traveled by Roman army units, as well as merchant caravans. As a result, Jesus must have been in contact with non-Jews his whole early life, not to mention the time in Egypt. After his rejection in Nazareth, see Luke chapter 4, 16:31. Jesus centered his ministry in the cosmopolitan Galilean city of Capernaum, contacts with Gentiles and their word significantly impacted his ministry and teaching. Even though he focused on Israel, the wide world was his concern during the more than 3 years of his ministry. Between his baptism and ascension, on at least 6 occasions, Jesus had direct contact with persons from Gentile nations. We'll look this week at the gospel accounts of these Sunday, contexts. The Samaritan woman. In the time of Jesus, ancient Israel was divided into 3 provinces: Galilee, Samaria, and Judea. Samaria was situated between Galilee and Judea. The Samaritans worshipped the God of Israel, but they also worshipped pagan gods imported from foreign lands. As an initial mission field, Samaria was ideal for the apostles because it was geographically close to Israel. Read John chapter 4, 4 through 30. What can we learn from this story about how Jesus witnessed to non-Jews? In what ways did Jesus step outside the bounds of tradition in order to reach out to this woman? The Samaritan woman was a lot well informed about the history of her people and asked intelligent questions. She led the conversation with her question. Jesus, however, responded to her questions and statements with the things that would benefit the woman spiritually. The only point where Jesus changed the conversation was when he told her to bring her husband, knowing that she wasn't married but had been with several men. Of course, asking her to do this opened the way for him to reach out to her. However uncomfortable she had become, nevertheless, by doing this, he was able to witness to her in a powerful way. Also, we shouldn't miss what happened in John chapter 4:27. The disciples were surprised because Jesus was talking with this foreign woman. Jesus transgressed a few Jewish customs, first asking a Samaritan woman to give him a drink, second being alone with her. In Israel, a man could not be seen alone with a woman unless she was a family member. Jesus followed Jewish customs when in Israel. However, in Samaria, he was outside Jewish territory and not bound by Jewish traditions, even though, as we have seen elsewhere, Jesus distinguished between human-made traditions and commands and precepts of God. How far out of your own comfort zone are you willing to go in order to minister to others? How far should you go? Monday, August 17. The Roman army officer, read Matthew chapter 8, 5 through 13. See also Luke chapter 7, 1 through 10. What does this story teach us about how even the largest cultural divides that can be breached for the sake of the gospel? In Capernaum, a Roman officer of centurion rank, commander of 100 men, thought out Jesus. The Jews resented the occupying Roman army, and many Romans hated the Jews. Despite this vast cultural and political divide, we can see the close relationship here between this Roman and the Jews. In Luke's account, he said that the centurion went to the elders of the Jews, Luke chapter 7, 3, to ask them to bring Jesus, and fascinatingly enough, they did just that. Asking Jesus to come here, the man's servant who were these elders. The text doesn't say, but it seemed to have related to Jesus differently than did some of the other leaders. Meanwhile, the centurion was obviously a man of faith. His words to Jesus, speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. Matthew chapter 8, verse 8, were an incredibly testimony to his belief in Jesus. The centurion did not wait to see whether the Jews themselves would receive the one who claimed to be their Messiah as the light which lightens every man that comes into the world. John chapter 1:9 had shone upon him. He had, though after off, discerned the glory of the Son of God. The Desire of Ages, page 317 by Ellen G. White. The centurion understood and respected Jewish religious sensitivities. He knew that according to law, a Jew was not allowed to enter a Gentile's house. So he requested that Jesus minister from a distance. The servant was healed. The faith of the Gentile centurion was rewarded. Jesus pointed out that the centurion was a prototype of the great day when people from all over the world would join the Jewish patriarchs at the messianic banquet. Whatever else one can take from the accounts of this healing, we can see that vast cultural divides were not able to keep the Jews and these Romans apart. What lessons can we take from this about how we must learn to transcend whatever cultural differences we can in good conscience in order to reach out to others. Tuesday, dealing with demons. Read Luke chapter 8 verse 26 through 39 and Matthew chapter 15 21 through 28. How do these stories help us understand how Jesus related to non-Jews? How do we understand Jews' words to the Canaanite woman? Also, what lessons should the disciples have picked up seeing Jesus minister to those who were not part of the covenant people? The region of the Gadarenes, Gadarenes region of the Gadarenes was an area formerly dominated by Greece, but it had become part of the Roman province of Judea. The man in the tombs was obviously possessed, and his possession manifested itself in horrific ways. He truly needed divine aid, which he got. That this liberation took place in Gentile territory is confirmed by the presence of the pigs. It is interesting to notice the reaction to this economic loss when the pigs drowned. The townspeople asked Jesus to leave their territory. Jesus in turn asked the healed man to stay. He was to witness to his own people about Jesus. No doubt, too, his changed life even more than his words would be a powerful testimony. In the next incident, the child in the region of Tyre and Sidon Sidon was demon-possessed and suffering terribly. Matthew chapter 15, verse 22. Her mother, Canaanite, illustrated the cultural melting pot of that region. Her Canaanite ancestors were displaced from their land when Israel inherited it under the leadership of Joshua. Here again, we see Jesus reaching out to those who want of Israel power proper. In talking to her, Jesus used somewhat harsh language, likening her people to dogs. But it tested her faith, showed her humble willingness to get the help she needed. The Savior is satisfied. He has tested her faith in Him. By His dealings with her, He has shown that she who has been regarded as an outcast from Israel is no longer an alien, but a child in God's household. As a child, it is her privilege to share in the Father's gifts. Christ now grants her request and finishes the lesson to the disciples. The Desirable Ages, page 401. The lesson was that, contrary to their understanding, the work of the gospel is not just for the Jews, but is to go to other nations as well. Wednesday, 10 lepers. Luke chapter 17, 11 through 19. What lessons are here for us, regardless of our nationality or origins? Notice first that the unfortunate men knew Jesus. They called him by both name and title, pleading for intervention. Intervention was fascinating too, is that they were not cleansed right then and there. They were told simply to go and present themselves to the priests, as specified in Leviticus chapter 14, verse 2. The fact that they just turned around and went showed that they believed in him and his power to heal them. Only the Samaritan, though, expressed appreciation for what Jesus had done. The 9 did not forget to go to the priests, but they neglected to give thanks to their healer. The Samaritan, as the text reads, turned around even before he got to the priests, though the text doesn't say that the other name were Jews. The location makes it very likely, besides the fact that Luke specifically mentioned that he was a Samaritan and that Jesus called him this stranger. Luke chapter 17, verse 18 makes it likely that the other 9 were indeed Jews. Although Jews normally had no dealings with the Samaritans, their malady, malady transcended those barriers. Common misfortune and tragedy that Albert Schweitzer termed the fellowship of suffering had broken down on ethnic divide. Their common need for cleaning, healing, and saving had brought them collectively to Jesus. Nevertheless, Samaritans and other foreigners were not the immediate goal for Jesus' ministry. I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. Matthew chapter 15:24. He planned first to establish a strong mission base among the Jews. Throughout his ministry, however, he gave his followers evidence that the gospel should go to the whole world. Although this point became clear only after his resurrection, even before then Jesus did things that were to open the minds of the disciples to the idea that world mission would become their main task. Through all these men showed faith. Only one turned around and thanked the Lord for what he had received. What does this tell us about the reasons that praise and thanksgiving are so important for faith? What are the things you have to be thankful for? Think about how much happier you would be if you constantly kept them before you, and what better way than by thanking God for all that you have to be thankful for. Thursday, the Greek and Jesus. The Greeks and Jesus. Now there was some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, with a request. Sir, they said, we would like to see Jesus. Philip went to tell Andrew. Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. Jesus replied, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. John chapter 12, 20 through 23. How does this incident help us to understand the heartfelt cry of people everywhere for salvation, for hope, for answers that can be found only in Jesus? These Greeks were probably converts to Judaism, since they came to Jerusalem to worship at the feast. Commentators have noted that these Greeks went to Philip, who, though Jewish, had a Greek name, which might have attracted them to him. Thus, while pioneering Christian work can be accomplished by foreign missionaries who have cultural sensitivity and a sympathetic understanding of the people they want to win for Christ, the most effective groundbreaking work is done by people with the same background as the target people. The Greeks came only days before Jesus' crucifixion. They no doubt were amazed by his words about his suffering, death, and final victory. The voice from heaven gave them something to think about as well. Jesus would have been encouraged by their desire to see him. Their approach signaled the beginning of world evangelization. It was acknowledged even by the Pharisees, who had exclaimed, "The world has gone after him." John chapter 12:19. When we see our men outside of Judaism wanting to come to Jesus, what a sign that the world was ready for his anointing, atoning death. Atoning death. These Greeks, representing the nations, tribes, and people of the world, were being drawn to him. Soon the Savior's cross would draw the people of all lands, and in all subsequent times to him. Verse 32, the disciples would find the world ready to receive the gospel. Read John chapter 12, 20 through 32. What is Jesus saying about losing your life in order to keep it? Why would he say that in this immediate context? How have you experienced just what he is talking about? Friday, further study. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west, and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew chapter 8, 11 and 12. Though these words were spoken in a particular context, in reference to a particular people, we shouldn't miss the principle. Those who have been given great privileges, great advantages in terms of spiritual and theological truths, need to be careful. It's easy to become complacent about truth that we have been given, truth that in some cases no one else is preaching and teaching. First, we need to make sure that we keep ourselves grounded in these truths. Then, second, we need to be willing to teach these to those who don't know them. Discussion questions. 1. The cross has shown us that the absolute universality of all humanity. Before God, we are all sinners, and we all need grace for salvation. Nevertheless, many groups often do see themselves as superior to others. This is common and has been although history. What about yourself and your own ethnic, social, financial, or cultural group? In what ways do you harbor and don't fool yourself? Don't fool yourself. You do harbor a sense of superiority to others is different from you. What's wrong with that attitude then? How can you learn at the foot of the cross to change it? 2. The woman at the well went back and witnessed to her own people about Jesus. What does this teach us about missions and the importance of using those of a particular culture to reach their own people? 3. The Greeks wanted to see Jesus. No doubt they had heard about him or had themselves see some of the things he had done. Jesus, of course, is now in heaven, and the church, his people, represent him here on earth. What does this mean for us in terms of the kind of life we live and kind of witness we present? Yes. So we have to know about what the cross-cultural missions like that. So we have to go inside the story. Faithful Bride, Part 1 by Liana Ruens, Mamur, Bangladesh. Yeah, it comes from Bangladesh. That's his story. Yeah, it's a little bit dark, so that's why. Rina, yeah. Santani, Shanti was raised in a Christian home. Here, written by Rina, and then Shanti was raised in a Christian home in Bangladesh. She was still quite young when her father died. Her mother struggled to feed her family. When Shanti was 13 years old, her mother gave her in marriage to a Hindu man. According to custom, when Shanti went to live with her husband's family, she was expected to take his religion, but Shanti refused. Her husband's family treated her badly, and everyone worked to separate Shanti from her Christian faith, but Shanti changed to her God. Shanti was expected to serve her mother-in-law, who treated her as a slave, shouting at her and denouncing her because Shanti refused to give up her faith in God. She was considered unclean and not allowed to work with food or utensils in the kitchen, but her mother-in-law made sure there was plenty of other work for the girl to do. Shanti's husband, Budori, was much older than Shanti and treated her kindly, but he was powerless to help his young bride, for he didn't dare defy his mother's orders. Didn't dare defy his mother's orders. There was no escape for the young bride because the couple was expected to remain with the family until after the first child was born. 3 years after they married, their first daughter, Lina, was born. Shanti tried to share her faith with her husband whenever she could, and over time he began to believe that Shanti was following the right religion. A Seventh-day Adventist pastor lived in the same village as Shanti. He visited the family and explained the church's beliefs, hoping to make Shanti's life a bit easier. Shanti's mother-in-law refused to listen to the pastor, but her father-in-law listened. The pastor returned to visit the family often, sharing his faith and Bible promises with the family members who were open to hearing them. As he worked in the village, the pastor found a number of people who were interested in learning about the Bible. The pastor arranged to hold evangelistic meetings without Shanti's knowledge. Her husband asked the pastor to study the Bible with him. Then he was secretly baptized. Shanti didn't know about her husband's interest until after he was baptized, but she was thrilled. Shanti's mother-in-law, however, was very unhappy to learn that her son had abandoned his God to worship his wife's God. She growled under her breath when she saw Santi and Broadroy going to church together. She often tried to prevent them from attending church. She would hide some household valuable and demand that the couple find it before they went to church. These searches often made the couple late. When her pranks no longer worked, Santi's mother-in-law turned to her other daughter-in-law for help in breaking the spirits of Santi and Broadroy. This daughter-in-law was selfish and often bickered, bickered and fought. She made life bitter for everyone. The part two. A year after Broadroy became a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. His elder brother died. Then Shanti became seriously ill with malaria. She didn't respond to medicines, and she became increasingly ill. When the fever left, Shanti's mother-in-law accused her of pretending to be ill. Shanti pleaded with God, "Why are you allowing me to suffer so in this family?" Even her husband grew discouraged and blamed God for their troubles. Santi's mother learned of her daughter's grave illness from some other villagers. So she set out to see her daughter. Santi's mother-in-law greeted Santi's mother with a demand, "Take her home with you. She is no good to us." Santi's mother took her daughter home, but her body remained with Santi's husband and mother-in-law. Santi's mother took her to the hospital where doctors could treat her properly. Meanwhile, Santi's mother-in-law was sure that Santi would die and began looking for a new wife for Broadroy. But Broadroy told them he was not interested in marrying someone else. In time, Santi recovered from her illness, but instead of returning to her mother-in-law's home, she stayed with her mother. Meanwhile, her sister-in-law, whose husband had died, demanded that she be given her share of the family's land for her 3 sons, while she had the right to the family land. Her demand put her parents-in-law into crisis because they could not survive without their land. The selfish daughter-in-law wanted everything she could get for herself and her sons. Slowly, Santi's mother-in-law realized that Santi had been a faithful daughter-in-law, while her other daughter-in-law had been selfish and demanding. She asked Broadroy, Bud Roy to go bring Santi home. Bud Roy went to visit Santi. He told her of his mother's change of heart and invited her to return home with him. Santi was eager to see her little girl again. She packed her things and returned with her husband. She was overjoyed to find that her mother-in-law had changed so much. The old woman welcomed Santi back into the home and treated her with respect and kindness. Santi was determined to be the best Christian she could, hoping that her own cruel mother-in-law would give her life to Jesus. Several years later, Santi's mother-in-law gave her life to Christ before she died. Bud Roy also renewed his commitment to Christ, and now the family lives together in peace as Christians. The faithful young bride had survived trials and taunting and led her husband and parents-in-law to Jesus. Lina Meruma is the eldest daughter of Santi and Bud Roy. She would like to become a physician. Yeah, so impressed, touched the story. Thank you. See you on lesson 9.